Good afternoon, and a very warm welcome to everyone joining us today to discuss what today's business leaders are expecting from business schools. My name's Carl Rhodes. I'm a Professor of Organisation Studies and the Dean at UTS Business School. Now, before we begin the proceedings, and on behalf of all those present, I would like to acknowledge the Gadigal people of the Eora Nation. These are the people on whose ancestral lands UTS City Campus, where I am, now stands. The Gadigal people have cared for their community, the land and the waters for thousands of generations based on their deep knowledge of their country. I pay respect to their ancestors, their elders, and I acknowledge their ongoing status as the first peoples of this land. Now, before I introduce today's panel, just a few housekeeping items. Today's webinar is being recorded and will be made available as a download soon via the UTS YouTube channel. We'll share the link by email to each of you and via various UTS social media channels by next week. To minimize technical interruptions and distractions, we have deactivated your cameras and microphones. Now, I do, however, encourage you to submit questions or comments in the Q&A box in your Zoom control panel. We'll try to get to as many questions as possible, and thank you to those who submitted questions when registering for today. Now, the world of business is changing. On the one hand, there is the massive disruption of COVID-19, which has left few industries unchanged. But there's also significant changes to community expectations of what constitutes a social license to operate. What's on top of the agenda for business now includes corporate social purpose, social impact, social justice, well-being, and climate change. Often these things are encapsulated under the heading environmental, social, and corporate governance, or ESG. So in these changed circumstances, we ask, what are today's business leaders expecting from business schools? And to answer this question, I'm joined by 5 of Australia's most respected and senior business leaders. In alphabetical order, we have Matt Halliday. Matt has over 20 years of leadership experience in the mining, metals, and energy sectors across finance, marketing, and corporate development. After an extensive career with Rio Tinto, Matt joined Ampol Australia, formerly Caltex Australia, as their managing director and CEO, effectively leading Australia's largest petrol and convenience network business. We have Andrew Landman. Currently, Andrew is head of Australasia and head of client business Asia Pacific at global asset manager and technology provider BlackRock. Andrew is a highly regarded funds management and private equity leader with various C-level positions for some of Australia's leading financial institutions. We're also joined by John Lydon. John is the co-chair of the Australian Climate Leaders Coalition, a group of 33 CEOs committed to taking action on emissions reduction and increased sustainability. Prior to this, John was managing partner at McKinsey & Company for over 5 years, where he oversaw a 300% growth while also increasing their social impact, external engagement, diversity, and inclusiveness. Joining us too is Nikki Sparshott. Nikki is the CEO of Unilever ANZ and the global CEO of T2. Prior to that, Nikki held several senior positions across the fast-moving consumer goods, retail, luxury, and e-commerce sectors for Unilever, the Coca-Cola Company, Procter & Gamble, and George Patterson. Nikki is also a UTS Business alumna, having completed a Bachelor of Business and Master of International Business with us. More recently, she completed an Executive Master's at INSEAD. And finally, Deanne Stewart is the CEO of Aware Super, previously known as First State Super. Deanne is an experienced international sector executive with expertise in superannuation, wealth management, and insurance industries across all strategic and operational portfolios. Prior to this, Deanne held several C-suite positions at MetLife, BT, Westpac, and Merrill Lynch. To each of today's panelists, thank you for joining us today. So we'll start with some questions to look at these expectations of business schools. Deanne, I might start with you. I mean, in light of the pandemic and changes brought on as a result, can you share with us how you have navigated your organization through such a challenging time and ensuring managing the expectations of the community and stakeholders? But also, what does this mean in terms of the new kinds of skills that have been required of your workforce to deal with this? Deanne.
Well, that's a big question there, Carl. Thanks very much. And before I begin, I'd really like to thank you and UTS for having me. I'm really looking forward to the conversation. Yes, definitely the last couple of years have been incredibly challenging for all of us, and certainly as a leader of a superannuation fund, that the industry in itself has gone through so much change over this period of time, together with the pandemic. And as a fund, we've also gone through 3 mergers during this period of time. So it's been a crazy, busy and challenging time. But probably as I hear that question, the first thing that really comes to my mind in terms of the navigating it is first and foremost just this belief that at the heart of everything to do with business is people. And so certainly as COVID was becoming clearer and clearer and its implications, and we were going into lockdown, it really did start with people and just making sure that their well-being, that they were really well looked after. So to just even give you a really simple example, I know back in March 2020, it seems so long ago, when we were all starting to look like, okay, we're going to need to shut the office down and have everyone working from home. Within that first week, the team turned their mind to saying, look, ultimately, as we see schools, for example, beginning to close, etc., we've absolutely got to care for our people. And so within a week, we designed a special leave for everyone that had caring responsibilities, that they could take this extra caring leave through this period of time, and flexibility on where they use it, how they use it, so that actually they could take that stress off. And the team designed that. We got board approval over the weekend so that when everyone landed on their first day into working from home, and the knowledge of what may happen to look after kids and kids from home, doing school from home, that they actually had that stress taken care of. So that's just an example of just how nimble, but really with that philosophy of deep care for your people and their well-being was at the heart of it. And just to give you an example, fast forward to the next lockdown. So this June, July period, certainly from a New South Wales perspective, what we observed, and particularly we've got a lot of our team in Victoria as well, is that after a couple of months, it was really wearing on people, and particularly everything that's going on in our industry. You could really see, and I know it's become a bit of a buzzword, but we could actually really see genuinely people languishing. And partly how we knew that is that we've got such a open culture that people were telling us this. And so really at the heart of that is that so many people had been working so hard, both with the mergers, COVID, the changes to our industry, but also not taking annual leave because where could I go? And so we introduced right at that moment, take a couple of days of annual leave and get an extra day of annual leave, even though they couldn't go anywhere, just to get people to take time out to sort of regenerate and renew where they possibly could. We also turned Fridays into Zoom free days because people were really over Zoom at that point, and then blocked out all of lunchtime. So lunch couldn't have a meeting because often if they had kids from home, that's when they would have to be checking in with the kids and stuff as well. So it was really about adapting and really seeing what suited and what help our team needed to have through that period. As it relates to stakeholders and the broader community, it was pretty similar. It was really listening, surveying, lots of catch-ups to really determine how we were or weren't serving at the time. I'm an avid believer in complaints, so I have a system on my phone where I literally look every day at member feedback and what's coming through, so you actually get a sense of what's working, what's not working, how you need to adapt. So they would be sort of some of the key things. And so I think the last bit of your question then was, well, what does that mean for leaders and how is that changing? Well, one thing that I think shouldn't be changing, but I think has come more to the forefront, and I think more and more people have realised it as they've worked from home, seen people in their personal settings, is that, you know, as a leader, it does start with care. It starts with the well-being of your team and making sure they feel they can be their best. And I think COVID has really brought that home in all sorts of different ways. So I'd say it starts with that, but probably a couple of other things that I think COVID has really highlighted through this period of time. One is how important mindset is. You know, there were days where I know I personally was like, oh, I don't know that I want to front up for another, 10 Zoom sessions today, but absolutely being able to switch your mindset and really have that adaptive, positive mindset with whatever's thrown at you is really important, particularly for leaders that have such a ripple effect on people. The second, I would say, is really around energy, managing your energy. So when you are behind the screen all day, managing that flow of energy and making sure that you are looking after yourself and your own energy levels has become really critical. And then finally, I would also say, leaders getting used to it being very outcome orientated rather than presentism. So no longer can you see people right in front of you and exactly what they're doing and be looking over their shoulder. It's actually all about outcomes. So I don't care whether you're doing your work at, 3 in the afternoon or 10 at night, if that suits you better. Actually, what I really care about is that you care about the organisation and that you're getting a great outcome. And I think that that is really changing, and getting leaders used to that type of leading is really critical. So they're the areas that we're working on together with this really adaptive leadership concept.
Look, thanks so much for that, Leanne. Very insightful and very interesting to reflect on that too, in terms of how we at universities and business schools prepare people to take on those very complex kind of cultural and interpersonal and leadership challenges. I mean, just building on that topic of leadership, Matt, turning to you. I mean, and interestingly, Deanne, you were talking about care. I mean, another dimension of care that's very much on the agenda today is care for the climate. And there's very much an increased focus about climate solutions as well as more broadly ESG. And I was wondering, Matt, if you could share with us some insights on how you've worked with your leadership team to ready the workforce for the changes that this brings. And again, whether you think any different skills or attributes are needed for the workforce to make that kind of contribution. Matt.
Yeah, thanks very much, Carl. Look, I think if I reflect on sort of the journey we're on, as you mentioned, we're Australia's largest independent fuels and convenience business today. And I think it's been really important as I've worked with my leadership team and then with the organisation more broadly around sort of the importance of placing climate and ESG very much at the heart of our strategy. And it's necessitated a really deep strategic reset for the business, looking beyond the fuels business today and looking very much at the assets that we have, the capabilities that we have today, and how we can adapt those to a very different future. And obviously, in the context of climate change and decarbonisation, the future needs to look quite different. And that's actually been a really rewarding process, I think, for the management team to align around, the change that's happening, the expectations of community, the expectations of capital markets, the expectations of our customers are very much consistent with the expectations of our people around how we're going to play a role to help decarbonise the world, and how our business can help really activate that or play an important role in activating that. It's actually been a really valuable experience to go through that reset, to then communicate to the organisation and more broadly externally our future energy and decarbonisation strategy in May this year, and start to talk about how we can really drive change. That's not to say that our core business today is not important and going to be an important part of that transition for the next 10 years or so, but we actually have a lot that we can bring in shaping the future, and that's been really engaging and rewarding for the leadership team, but for the organisation and our people more broadly. And in terms of our strategy, very much purpose-led. So our purpose got reset. So it's to power better journeys today and tomorrow. We've got a strong set of values that actually didn't change, that are very consistent with driving that purpose. And one of our pillars in our strategy is people and culture. So how can we engage the organisation around the strategy and set up both the capabilities and the broader cultural environment to have people really mobilised around the delivery of that strategy. What's from a capability point of view, I think, to touch on that part of your question, we've really focused on a few areas. And I think it's, we've brought a lot of external brought a lot of people into the business, but also I think it's important to get the balance right between that and helping people with skills that are important within the business today to adapt and play a role in some of the future energy projects, which is really exciting for them. Ultimately, we're focused on innovation. Our sort of cultural aspiration is to be more nimble, bold, and ambitious. So innovation compared to where we are today has been a big focus area. So not doing projects in a very conventional 100-year-old company way, but needing to be more dynamic, be able to fail fast, be able to try some things and celebrate failure and the learning that comes from that. Inclusion and diversity in terms of the teams and the organisation we have. So you want different thinking and you need people working together. Far more so than I think certainly has been common within our business or a lot of businesses that I've worked in the past. Because I think increasingly as technology advances, a lot of the mechanics need to be understood, but will be done by machines and computers, and it's the ability of people to work together that is so important to be able to deliver outcomes. And probably the extension of that, and I think what is the biggest sort of challenge and constraint that we need to overcome to play a very active role in delivering our future energy and decarbonisation strategy is how we work with other partners, other companies, governments, other stakeholders, because no one has the solution. So how do you work together across a system to be able to activate change? And so we're looking for people who really have those skills. It's an extension of how you work with people within an organisation, but as an organisation overall, we need to be able to work with partners far more effectively, I think, than we have in the past, and that's very much a focus for us. So I might leave it there. There's some of the capabilities that we're focusing on building within Ampol.
Well, thanks very much for that, Matt. And it's an interesting theme emerging in the discussion so far, almost as if, as technology is expanding and automation is expanding, it's almost as if what makes us uniquely human are the things that become even more important rather than less important, anywhere from care to working with people to innovation. So that's a really interesting observation. We might build on that a bit more, and I'll turn to you, Andrew, and looking specifically at financial services. I mean, how do you see your industry shifting even further than what it has? What new trends do you see occurring domestically and internationally? And again, what does that mean for skills? And perhaps even more specifically, what does that mean for the kinds of things that you might expect from universities and business schools?
Yeah, thank you. And thank you for everyone out there listening. I think I'll start with financial services. When I started, which sadly was a long time ago now, was you were almost rewarded for the time in the office. And I think some of the great things that have come out of the last 2 years is we've really focused on removing this wonderful thing that everyone used to call work-life balance, which somehow deleted work and life separately. And And what we've done is created, hopefully going forward, life balance. Because financial services, a lot of people did many hours in the office and they didn't actually participate in the community. They didn't have the opportunity to, if they're a parent, have dinner with their children, coach their local football teams in the afternoons. It was really a reward for hours. So I think the biggest thing the financial services thing has seen is actually, yes, I can do my work from different locations. Yes, I can actually participate in the community and be engaged with my family, friends, partners, etc. But then thirdly, the one thing that we all missed so badly was human interaction and collaboration. So not that I'm suggesting all financial services will change their office layout, but collaboration will be key for people to engage. And it's not just about IQ, it's about EQ as well. And learning, I think part of your question is around universities. The most joyous time at university is engaging with your friends and other people and asking questions, posing questions. We pride ourselves in BlackRock of no dumb question. So every question is valid. And I think that's hard in a Zoom world. So financial services as a whole will come back to the office. I think not in the lens that we once saw of 18, 20-hour days and see how your hourly rate could be not very attractive. So I think going back to Deanne's comment of care, it really brings it back to the individual. And I think one thing I'd stress there is that care is at the individual level. Depending on your life stage, you fundamentally experience this differently. Sometimes we do focus on parents with the children at home, but some people had elderly parents that they had to care for. Some people had a flatmate that they didn't quite get along with. They didn't choose them as a life partner, but they had to live at home with them 24/7 and have multiple Zoom calls interacting with each other. So I think financial services has to bring it down to the individual and really understand the life stage of that individual. And then, what's changing in the industry as a whole outside of that human element is there's continual learning and continual new technologies coming through. So I've tried not to mention the word cryptocurrency all day today, but I've just mentioned it. Whether we're looking at blockchain, cryptos, we're still investing in direct assets. We still have publicly listed assets like exchange, equities on the exchange. When I started, ETFs were actually out there, but they weren't, exchange traded funds were not of the size they are today. So, my expectation for people wanting to join BlackRock or the universities is encourage this continual learning, because you cannot keep up with the industry unless you set aside time every day to read, learn, do a course. I think university courses where there's human interaction, and I am a little bit biased on this one. Online, Google seems to get in the way because you can get some pretty quick answers, whether they're right or wrong. I like the face-to-face connectivity of universities where you can actually pose questions and think about new initiatives. I think the financial services is also thinking about universities and what people are seeing in the industry. You really need to think about what's career planning, because the media loves the hype. And I'm not going to pick on them today, but we only hear about the big winners, the big entrepreneurs, and I think financial services has a place to think about what are the career plans that we can offer people over the long term. It's not a lotto win. It's not suddenly you created $1 billion tech firm. But how do we encourage people to have long-term careers that are considered, thoughtful, and actually planned? We really look at our people and I think it's a good thing to remember for all. Lots of people have personal coaches, personal trainers for their health, but not many people have personal trainers or coaches or mentors for their career. And we'd really encourage people to utilize universities for that, because they have some, whether it's Professor Carl, as someone to help guide people. The connections through alumni really gives you the opportunity to think about what industry do you want to go to, and how can you have broad learning. We want people to have the broadest learning possible, so they can have a view. And why I say they need a view is my final comment. Financial services has really now had a lot of pressure put on itself to have a purpose. And the reason for that is people are frustrated sometimes, depending on which country you're in, but a lot of countries, on the government's action in certain things, whether that's, we're seeing these protest activity in Australia at the moment. So they are looking at the asset owners, the asset managers, and corporate entities to actually solve some of the world's problems. So that's a big obligation that's transferred to primarily entities that are responsible for shareholders. So there could be a natural conflict in that. So you want individuals with a passion, a view, and they can bring something to the table. I want to be shocked by my new people because they've learnt completely different to me. My 11-year-old can teach me a lot more things than what I learnt when I was 11. So they're learning differently, and they should bring all that to the table. So I might stop there.
Look, thanks, Andrew. You really covered a lot of ground there. I mean, many of the issues we're grappling with in universities around providing learning for a lifetime rather than just kind of at the beginning of your career, but also more broadly about the changing role and expectations of business. And in a sense, reflecting on all the comments made, this all kind of connects up with what people often call these days the future of work. And I might now turn to you, John, to ask a question specifically about this. I mean, with a rapidly evolving workforce, changing demographic of people, changing future requirements, if you look more generally at expectations from people in relation to the future of work, what do you see as some of the key attributes or skills that are required as we continue this evolution?
Thank you, Carl. And you know what? If you didn't see a theme emerging before, you'll probably see an even stronger theme now, because I've loved some of the comments, and because they're all about the future and how these companies are evolving. I think it goes a lot to what we call the future of work. Now, there's been many reports on that. McKinsey's done a lot, many, but I'm actually going to go to economics to answer this question. I'm going to finish with people. I'm going to start with economics and something that we published with the BCA a few years ago called Compete to Prosper. And what that was about, it's how is Australia going to have comparative advantage and be competitive in the future? Because if you can identify those areas, it's probably pretty good if you're thinking about where I'm going to want to develop skills and competencies. I should focus myself on those areas where it's likely this lasting comparative advantage is going to lead to a lot of growth and a lot of job opportunities. And you know what, we did that, and we thought, there's big job categories like in healthcare and education and technology. But actually, very quickly we realized it's not about the job. It's actually about what's under the surface, what's actually going on, and what are the skills needed for the activities in these jobs as they all change. And we found there were three classifications, three rough groupings of activities. There was transformation activities. That's turning something into something else, usually a physical product, but it could also be information, right? It's getting an input and making it into something else. There was transaction activities, think whether you're a checkout in a supermarket or a bank teller in the old days, right? That's doing that transaction. And then there was an interesting one. There was interaction skills. And this is a lot of what we've been talking about. And that is the collaboration, human interaction. It's the, embodied in the deep humanity and care for people, Deanne, that you spoke about. It's the collaboration that you spoke about, right? It's the learning with people, Andrew, you spoke about. So what we found was the transformation, that stays pretty stable, actually. It just moves a little bit from physical into informational. The transaction jobs, they really drop off, and you're starting to see that now. There's very, very few. But it's actually these other, other category, these interaction jobs and the skills that are needed for them. Massive growth, and we're truly seeing that now. And if you needed any test of it, this last year and a half, 2 years have been a test of how important these are. So what is needed, right? What are the skills and attributes to be great at those interaction activities that are increasingly part of every job and will be in the future? I think it's 40% growth, right, in those in the next few years. That is collaboration, it's problem solving, it's curiosity, empathy, understanding of others, taking different perspectives. So I know when we were interviewing at McKinsey, but also when we saw clients interviewing for graduate type roles, they were much more important than some of the more technical skills that you would think a degree is all about. Yeah, there's a base level that you have to have, particularly if it's a technical role, but we really want to bring one who we thought was novel to live the world interaction skills. So looking for that innate curiosity, experimentation, willingness to learn, and willingness to give and share, work with others. Now, question is, the way universities have been disrupted in this last couple of years, is there still enough of that in the way people are learning today? Is there still enough of that group work? We maybe all remember in groups at uni being with the people that we just couldn't get on with, and what a great education that was, because we had to learn how to get to a great group outcome. But is that still, do you hate people enough when it's over Zoom, or actually you have to be in person for that? So therefore you're really learning how to get on and love them really. So that's really a question back as we come into a living with COVID world. How is the business school and how are universities going to make sure that those interaction skills are always going to be at the forefront in every way we work?
Look, thanks so much, John. That's very insightful, and for us in the business school, indeed, very challenging as well in terms of those expectations. Getting to a little bit more specifics, I'm going to turn to you now, Nikki. And Unilever is obviously a company that's long been dedicated to sustainability and making a positive difference to the society, and to the planet more generally. So if you think, for example, of the things John's been saying and then others have been saying about new skills, how does that relate to insights about how businesses engage their workforce, engage a culture in terms of socially responsible commitments? And again, do you expect people coming out of business schools and joining your organization to understand and contribute to this kind of thing?
Yeah, absolutely. So, you're right. Unilever has a rich history of this. And if you go back 140 plus years to our founders, we had sort of Lord Lever, who was trying to democratize access to hygiene with a bar of soap, or Sir Thomas Lipton, who wanted to give access to the masses with a simple, humble cup of tea. And you fast forward today and Unilever still embraces that principle of how do you be a good citizen and in service of the community while simultaneously having a really strong business model. And what I think is really exciting is that not only do we have an obligation and a responsibility as business leaders, but we have an opportunity right now to genuinely reimagine a new form of capitalism. So one that actually does deliver financial obligation and profitable growth, because that does provide the fuel, but simultaneously have this regenerative impact on the planet, not just do no harm, but positively do good, and simultaneously contribute to this fairer and more socially inclusive world. And the inconvenient truth of all of that is that you need to be able to do all at once. It's not good enough in times of crisis to say, I'm dialing up one and forgetting the others. You need to be able to hold all of them true and be able to progress them together. And I think that's what's really interesting. So when I think about our own workforce, there's a couple of things that come to mind for me. And the first one is that you know, no longer do people want to be part of brands or businesses that are the best in the world. They also want to be part of brands or businesses that are the best for the world. And I think people are quite motivated by their ability to create some impact. You know, I spent a lot of my career saying, one day I'm going to leave corporate world and I'm going to go and work at an NGO. And then thankfully I had a really good aha moment that said, well, why would I do that? I get up every day. I spend a lot of time at work. How do I ensure that every moment of the time I invest has the ability to have a positive ripple effect? And I think we're finding more than ever before, there is a huge groundswell of people that want to do exactly the same. So I think purpose is really powerful as a means of unlocking discretionary effort and impact from the workforce. And maybe if you talk specifically about mobilisation, there's 3 areas that I would call out. And the first one is that brands with purpose grow. You know, we reach 2 billion people around the world every single day with Unilever products. That's a really amazing opportunity to have small difference making quite a big impact. And we also know that those brands grow 3 to 4 times faster. That's motivating for people to work on a portfolio of brands that has the ability to grow ahead and still do good. And brands like Dove and Ben & Jerry's and T2 and many others at Unilever have been specifically designed with that intent. But the second one is that companies with purpose last. And you think about mobilizing a workforce, you know, people want to be part of a community that attracts investment. And investors want to invest behind these kind of businesses, that attracts best-in-class partners, best-in-class suppliers, where you can be part of an ecosystem of the kind of like-minded people that also want to do the same. So that companies with purpose last, I think, is a huge mobilizer. And the one, you know, very practical tip I would give there is, it's no point having a business plan and a sustainability plan. You need to have them one in the same. You need one single plan for your organisation that harnesses energy around a vision, but that inextricably links that triple bottom line imperative, because then people can get around it with less conflict than would normally happen. And the last one, and I think this is probably the most important, is that people with purpose thrive. You know, it goes back to that point about wanting to make a difference. And when I think about, you know, COVID has threatened our shared stability, but so too has climate change, so too does social inequality. And I have seen some incredible innovation and intuition come to light over the course of the last 2 years as people want to be part of a solution to make things better. So, you know, I'm a bit of a believer in superpowers. How do you create the Avengers of the corporate world in your organization? But I think, you know, 4 practical tips that I would share here, and I think are really relevant for universities and for students that are going through their own learning journey, is you need a diverse workforce. You know, you lose that notion of hierarchy. It honestly doesn't matter. Unlock the ability of the superpowers that sit irrespective of where people sit in the hierarchy is a really important skill. The second one is the power of distributed leadership. You know, our frontline workers, our factory workers, our field teams, those people closest to the operations are the ones that are going to be able to raise the issues fast and come up with creative solutions. And, you know, so I remember someone said to me recently, what does CEO stand for? Like, is it actually a real thing, CEO? And immediately what came to mind was Chief Everything Officer, because I was in one of those moments where it felt like everything was coming, but actually nothing can be resolved without really good people. And that comes from that diversity. The other one that I would say, and I think it is really important for business schools, but also for individuals, is to be able to hold that duality of leadership, IQ plus EQ, productivity plus well-being, sustainability plus profitability. You know, you need to be able to be comfortable with finding solutions that navigate the end-to-end. And then the last point I would say is about giving people space. You know, if you want to unlock or mobilize the energy that's in your workforce, then, you know, sometimes I need to work out when I lead from the front, lead from within, or get the hell out of the way and let someone else lead that is better equipped to do it. Because I think at the end of the day, leadership's not about title, it's about impact.
Look, thanks so much, Nikki. And it's really interesting listening to all of you here. and I'm thinking of this in terms of, the kind of skills people need and the kind of things business schools can offer. You're talking about care and learning for a lifetime and interaction, communication, curiosity, creativity, purpose, leadership. But that then brings us to a perhaps controversial question, and I'll ask Andrew you to consider this first, but others might want to say things afterwards. So, in a world where these new skills are required, but also where technical skills are changing rapidly and need to be renewed all the time, where private providers are offering online learning opportunities, are universities still relevant? What do you think would motivate somebody to study business in university today?
Oh, look, thank you for the controversial question. I'll answer it quickly. Yes, to universities are relevant. Look, I think business schools in particular, and there's a little bit of bias on this, no matter whether you're in a startup or a small local shop or running a corporate entity, that broad skill and knowledge will enhance your career tenfold. And I think if you haven't heard it already from the other four speakers, collaboration, diversity of thoughts and learning is absolutely key. I don't think you get that from online learning. It's a pretty lonely place, working from home or doing a course online by yourself on a laptop. And do you get the full context without talking? It's almost like rote learning versus actually engaging. So the only thing I would say that from a controversial response point of view is the universities must adapt though to that, because expectations of students, expectations of employers of their students coming out of university are changing, and to be relevant, that broad learning, Nikki referenced purpose. Does the university have a purpose? Why am I choosing a particular university or business school? Do I have an affiliation with that? And I think those type of things are very important. And I'll probably leave it to the other guest speakers, but I think they're absolutely critical. But I do like collaborational learning with broad learning. Without that, I don't think success will be difficult.
Thanks, Andrew. I'm just going to throw that one back to you, actually, Nikki. As you know, one of a very successful member of the alumni of the university and leading a major organization, do you still think that the business schools are accommodating the future needs, or should we change?
I think any organization that isn't constantly looking at sort of reimagining the future is just re-engineering the past. So I actually think everyone needs to be constantly in a state of sort of continuous improvement. But absolutely, I think, the fact that the UTS has already started to make, courses like social enterprise and sustainability and the impact of First Nations people and Indigenous culture embedded in part of the courses that are being run, I think talks to the progress being made there. The one thing that I think is really important, that there was a time when people used to talk about hard skills, and soft skills. And if we're really honest, those soft skills were sometimes relegated to this space of kind of bleeding heart leader that might not be tough enough to take the tough decisions and all of that kind of very old-fashioned rhetoric. I think it's really important to help equip the next generation of leaders equally with the soft skills for success, and many of which have been talked about today. But I actually think, we underestimate emotional capital in an organisation. And when you go through 2 years of crisis, that we've all had to experience in different ways in our varying organisations, you realise how important it is to be on the pulse of the emotions that reside in an organisation, harness them well, and the ability to leverage that emotional capital to get people to lean in and do extraordinary things in difficult times. So I think that's something to never underestimate in any learning environment.
Thanks, Nikki. I mean, it's interesting because if we look at this kind of connection between so-called soft and hard skills, I mean, one of the very hard problems we have at the moment in the world is climate change. but addressing it very much coming from a position of care. I mean, John, I mean, given the creation of the Climate Leaders Coalition, to what extent do you think business schools can play a role in helping students to become conscious leaders when it comes to climate?
And this is the biggest challenge of our times, and it's actually the biggest challenge for business of our times, also the biggest opportunity. So if business schools weren't equipping leaders, then I'm not sure, where the world's really going to end up. And, you want to be a little bit cynical about it, then probably the rise of business doing more damage to the environment in, pursuit of shareholder value has increased at about the same proportion as the rise of the MBA program in the last 30 years or so. So is that a correlation? I'm not sure. I want it to be challenging. So it's great to hear of some of the work at UTS in embedding some social purpose into the Bachelor of Business and MBA program. It's great to hear of the need for the sort of softer skills. And if I think about Climate Leaders Coalition, that's 33 companies and their CEOs who are collaborating, right? Natural competitors are collaborating to do things like Scope 3 emissions in the supply chain, where you have to be a bit vulnerable and sort of bear all to people who, you used to just be hard at negotiating with on prices and things like that. But I think it needs to go further. And I do think some of the hard skills we're going to need have to evolve as well. So, I'm not sure how the accounting modules in the business degrees these days think about discounting the net present value. If it's anything like the stuff I did, then great. There's a sort of weighted average cost of capital. Here's your pricing model. This is how it all works. But actually, when you think of the investments that are going to be needed to create a sustainable future, is that appropriate, right? Or actually, should you think about differential discounting for costs and benefits? Should you think about different discount rates? Should you think about the sort of multiplier effect and the reinforcing loops that are in a lot of the nature-based solutions? Because they don't get recognized by the typical way we would teach our MBA students to do those models. It's like in the accounting courses, probably now, I'd hope we're looking at TCFD and the impact of that on what are going to be standard reporting and accounting in respect of climate change. But what about TNFD, right? The task force on nature-related financial disclosures. That'll be coming at business in the time that these students actually come out and graduate, and natural capital and nature is going to be so much bigger than just carbon dioxide and emissions. And I think what an exciting time. I'd love to see not only that embedded into the business teaching, but also the business schools to have a role on these task forces and to help shape some of the coming environment, because that way we can harness the immense passion and purpose that I see every time I think about a business school or go in one, to actually bring that into business in a really constructive way. That's my call to action for you, Carl.
Thanks, John. We'll definitely, those are definitely the things that are very much on our agenda as we kind of look to what it means to be a business school today. So thank you very much. And it's interesting too, John, in terms of, the relation you're talking about between, the traditionally kind of very technical issues of accounting and how that relates to the more kind of aspirational human aspects of purpose, and to show the connection between these two. Again, reflecting on Nikki's comments, saying that they're not things that are necessarily separate. Deanne, I might ask you if you might want to reflect a bit more on that from the point of view of Aware Super as a young, progressive and dynamic workforce. How do you think we in business schools might be able to diversify our course content in a way that links the human, social and interpersonal skills with the more traditional technical skills? I'm sure you don't want people who don't understand accounting working for you either.
Preferably not, especially if you're in the investments team or finance. But no, look, I'm really enjoying this conversation, and I would, if I just pick up on the technical side and add to a little bit to what John said, I would say, and I know that you UTS are looking at this, and I know we're in partnership with you around additional technical skills into the future, and then I'll come on to the human side. But if I think about just how critical ESG is, you know, Aware Super has certainly been one of the lead super funds really integrating ESG into the way that we really analyse companies and their likely future. But that's a skill set that is in, you know, a lot of demand. And so really applying that within business schools, within finance courses is so critical for certainly investors and super funds like ourselves. So I'd add that onto the technical side, but back onto the human side. Look, I would say, and I imagine that there's a number of you listening, if I reflect back to my MBA, and I remember doing it thinking, oh, I'm so looking forward to doing the entrepreneurial class and the VC class and this and that. And then it came to doing the organisational development and change class and the negotiation class. And I was like, yeah, whatever. You know, I'm really interested in these more technical classes. They're really interesting. And I remember sitting near a dear friend of mine in the organisational development class, and he was just so good. And so he had so much emotional intelligence to the way he applied himself in that class together with the IQ. He went to this fledgling company called Google at the time and became their global head of HR. Laszlo Bock is his name. And I look at that and I think, oh my God, he so understood, even as we were young doing our MBA, just how critical that was. And if I think about what goes in front of our leaders, you know, on a daily basis, if I just think about this past week and my interactions with people, I've had the whole spectrum. I've had this amazing young girl just so excited about her wedding that's in a couple of days, right through to a staff member, excuse me, facing really serious mental health issues and really struggling, right through to a really, really amazing colleague whose wife has just been diagnosed with stage 4 cancer. Like these are people's lives, and you are there working with them, leading them, you know, and really trying to navigate through this. And so that human side, that ability to really connect, to understand, to empathize, to be curious, you know, I cannot speak enough about how critical that is, together with the technical skills, to actually be a really well-rounded. And in fact, I would go so far to say, if you actually don't have both, your chances of, you know, really moving up in an organization these days, thankfully, are far more limited. You know, the old days of, if you had the technical skills, you just go up, up, up. I think they're very limited now. You need to have so much more of, whether you call them soft skills. I agree with you, Nikki. I don't like calling them soft skills. They're actually just skills. They are so critical.
Look, thanks so much, Deanne. And again, you know, I mean, interesting that all of this discussion is also wrapped up more generally in kind of a period of change we're going through. I mean, and no more is that change, Matt, for organizations like yours, for example. If you look at electric vehicles and the electric vehicle charging network. I mean, when you look at these kind of quite radical changes and you think of it in terms of employees, what kind of skills, I mean, just, and maybe to try and wrap the discussion up a bit, what kind of skills are going to help drive these broad changes that you in particular, but everyone in some sense is facing?
Yeah, no, thanks, Carl. No, it's a good example. Really, I mean, yes, the technical, engineering and accounting, commercial skills all play an important role. I wouldn't want to sort of say that's not the case, but really what we look for in differentiating sort of the skills and the people we're looking for is, I mentioned them a bit before, on the innovation side. So if you do take an EV charging rollout, which we're pursuing across 120 of our sites at the moment, you want not just to go and put a piece of hardware on the site, but you know, how can you help reimagine the role the site can play for the customer within our business. So how can you link it to solar panels? How can you link it to batteries? How can that connect to the broader grid environment? How does it link to a digital solution for the customer? So it makes it a product or a service that's easy to use. We're looking for that kind of more holistic view of, from the point of view of the customer, from the point of view of the overall asset. How can you reimagine the kind of the solution we can put in place? It's important that, we mentioned earlier inclusion, or the ability to collaborate across a business. There's someone in the business who's running that site, running that part of the business today. So how can you work with them to make sure that you can seamlessly deliver something new to the site? How can you make that happen in a safe way? And then finally, you want people who can be open to working with partners. So, Australia's a small part of a broader world. There is a lot happening on this topic, and Australia is actually by no means at the front of the queue. I think it's fair to say. So, how do we learn? How do you learn? How do you work with partners? How do you make sure that you're not just closed-minded in terms of getting on and delivering a project, but how can you bring a lot of the expertise and learning that's happened in the rest of the world and bring partners into the business and the way that we deliver? And of course, ultimately, people with that mindset and that passion to really deliver against our purpose is an overriding kind of objective for us in bringing people into the business.
Look, thanks so much, Matt. And that's a really insight. And again, bringing on this idea of purpose, which has kind of permeated through the discussion here today, and what that means, and also what it's changing. I'm thinking John said before, has the rise of the MBA and the climate crisis been somehow related to one another? And if I was a betting person, I would say yes, really part of the same problem. And in a sense, if you think of the big problems that we're facing today, which includes climate, but also inequality on a range of levels, political populism on a range of levels, both on both sides of politics. These are key things that are facing business, that are facing business schools, and I think what we're saying here is that we all really need to be part of the solution and part of the answer to that. And if I'm getting you right, that this then comes from bringing out humanity, bringing out people's ability to question, bringing out perspectives, bringing out care, bringing out curiosity, innovation, questioning the value of critique and the value of human interaction. And I must say, for us in business schools, that is a huge challenge. That is not what we've traditionally done. Maybe one class in your organization development course, Deanne, might have had something to do with it, but it's not what we've traditionally been known for. And that is a huge challenge, and one very much that we here at UTS Business School are really focusing on reformulating what a business school can be and what a business school can do to address these kind of issues. So I would really like to say to everyone, thanks so much for joining us today. It's been great having you. Great to learn from you and to hear about your kind of unique and different experiences, albeit ones that kind of are connected with some important themes that I think we can all learn from. So thank you. Now, ladies and gentlemen, as we now draw to a close today's webinar, I'm also very pleased to share with you some details of more UTS Business School thought leadership and events which will be coming up this year. Now, on Tuesday of next year, we will host Professor Julie Batalana from Harvard Business School to discuss her groundbreaking new book, Power for All, How It Really Works and Why It's Everyone's Business. On Friday, the 3rd of December, as part of the UTS and Stanford Australia Foundation partnership, we will host renowned Professor of Organisational Behaviour, Jeffrey Pfeffer, to discuss his research and analysis for how modern management harms employee health and company performance and what we can do about it. Please head to the UTS Business School website for details, or stay tuned for invitations coming in your email soon. But for now, thanks again to our marvelous panel members today for your tremendous insights, recommendations, and knowledge. And to our audience, thank you for your time, and we look forward to hosting you again at UTS, ideally in person sometime soon. So on behalf of UTS Business School, goodbye.